What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking contracts, and heading into the 2024-25 season, players are being paid more now than ever. And with a lot of guys signing these new big tickets, I thought it would be fun to research 10 of the best contracts out there. But after doing a little bit of research, I noticed that there's actually a lot more bad big ticket contracts than there are good ones. So instead, we're going to pivot and talk about the 10 worst contracts heading into the 2024-25 hockey season. There's a lot out there, and we got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let's start with number 10, Deone Severson. The thing with Severson that completely blows my mind is that he just doesn't fit the direction for the Blue Jackets at all. Now, last season, it felt like the Blue Jackets were trying to take a step. They had some nice players, they had some good young players who were up and coming, and maybe they thought they could compete a little bit more, but I was never a believer in their blue line. Severson has 7 years left on his deal at $6.3 million a season, and with them just lacking a lot of talent on their blue line and sustaining a ton of injuries with top guys like Zach Werenski, there's just not enough there. Severson's around 30 years old right now, and when this contract ends, he's going to be well into his 30s and just doesn't really fit the model that the Blue Jackets are trying to create right now. Not the best contract. Obviously, the Blue Jackets have the cap space to eat it up right now, so it's not the biggest deal, but it still deserves to be a top 10 worst contract on any list heading into this upcoming season. Coming in at number 9, I really wanted to exclude this one from the list, but then I thought, well, we have to talk about these because they're going to still be problems down the line. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard Krug is going to miss the entire season because of an ankle injury that he has, dealing with the rehab and the surgery that comes with it. He was tearing up in a press conference, so of course we all feel bad. He's a great guy off the ice and on the ice, but the contract for the Blues, it's just not a good fit right now. Krug has regressed a bit. He's more of an offensive defenseman, and where the Blues are at in their organization right now, he's just not a good fit. They tried to move him to Philadelphia, but he used his no trade clause, so that didn't end up happening. It's clear that the Blues don't want him on the roster, and with 3 years left on his deal, him missing this season at $6.5 million a year, the Blues have another contract that just feels like dead weight. I'm not saying this is the worst contract in the league because there's only 3 years left, and this upcoming season he's just going to be on LTIR, so it's not going to impact their roster all that much, but still, this contract, it hasn't aged well for the Blues, and the whole Krug era of St. Louis just hasn't really been a good fit for both parties. Up next at number 8 is honestly one of the strangest contracts that wasn't so bad when it was signed, but it just continues to age even more poorly, and that's the Tyler Seguin deal, where he still has 3 years left on his contract at $9.9 million AAV. The tough part about this contract is I think Seguin is still a solid player, but he is not worth $10 million. With the Stars having better talent on their team like Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnston, Roope Hintz, and others, I just feel like they're massively overpaying this guy, and eventually it might actually get in the way of them bringing in other players or signing them to fair enough deals. I'm just saying, it's not like Seguin's like this terrible player. He's still producing and had a very solid year, and probably will take on a bigger role this season with the absence of Joe Pavelski retiring from the Stars. So I don't really hate this contract. It's not the worst, but it's just an overpay by a lot. Seguin is more worth around $6 to $7 million, not that $10 million ticket. So unfortunately for the Stars, they're probably going to be stuck with this until it's over, but 3 more years of Tyler Seguin in Dallas at around $10 million is just brutal to me. Coming in at number 7, this is where I have Sean Couturier, and it's not that I don't like the fit of Sean Couturier in Philly. I just feel like he's a little bit overpaid based on the projections that this Philly team has for when they're actually going to turn things around and become a more competitive organization again. Now, they have Michkov playing on the team this year, so maybe he'll help bump up Couturier's numbers, but at best, Couturier's been a 60 to 70 point scorer. Even with his max potential, I can't see him getting higher than that. He's got 6 more years left on this deal at $7.6 million. He's not really a great top line center. He's playing that role right now, but it's not the perfect fit for any team out there, even Philadelphia. I just don't really like this deal. I feel like it's a massive overpay for a guy who has been maybe a second line center at best in his career. So unfortunately, Philadelphia, like some of the other teams on this list, are just going to have to deal with this because it might be one of the more immovable contracts in the league right now because you're overpaying a guy who, like I said, should just be a second line center. Coming in at number 6, this is where I have Pierre-Luc Dubois, and some of you might think this is too low, but I actually project him to have a much better season this year than he did with LA. I actually like that he came out and took a lot of ownership for what happened over there with the Kings, saying how he never really settled in and that it just didn't feel like it was a good blend between the organization and the player. So good on him for talking about that. But now let's talk about his era with the Washington Capitals. He He still has 7 years left on this deal at $8.5 million, and the Capitals desperately need some help at center, so this is a big gamble for them. But if it does work out and he could become the same player that he was in Winnipeg, then I actually think this will be a good deal for them. But like I said, it could go one way or the other. He could be the player he was in Winnipeg, or he could be the player that he was in LA. I'm not big on judging players based on one season, and I'm not in the locker room, so I can't speak to how his teammates feel about him. But I'm still giving a little bit more hope to Pierre-Luc Dubois. At this point, based on what we saw last season, I think it's fair to include him on this list, but I can't say he's a top 5 worst contract because I still think there's a lot of potential there, and I actually think that the Capitals were the best organization for him to go to at this point. Coming in at number 5, this is where I have one of the signings from the offseason in Chandler Stevenson. He inked a deal for 7 years at $6.25 a season for the Kraken. One of the more odd deals signed this year. The Kraken aren't exactly a team with the best direction right now. Stevenson's around 30 years old, so this will take him into his upper 30s. At best, he's been a middle six guy. He's never really even cracked 20 goals in his career, so I'm not sure what they were paying for here. I feel like Seattle is really desperate to add some center depth to this roster, and with some of the limited players out there, or maybe players just not wanting to play for the Kraken just yet, I feel like this was them settling and trying to show their fan base that, hey, we're going to do something to improve this team because we just were in the playoffs and then we drastically missed the following year. Just a weird contract signing. I've never found Stevenson to be some kind of elite player. I think he's more of a bottom six guy who can be nice in that role, but when you put him in a bigger role, I just don't think his skills and talent is going to translate. It's just not a signing that I'm a big fan of. Like I said, he's never shown me much. He's pretty good, but not an elite player, and I don't think this is going to be the answer for Seattle. And I actually think that this is one of the worst signings of the offseason, so hopefully it works out for them, but I'm just not a big fan of this deal at all. Next up, you guys have probably heard me talk about this contract a lot, whether it's in other contract videos or just when I talk about the Blackhawks in general. It's the Seth Jones deal. Still a lot of term left on this one. He's got 6 years left at $9.5 million a season, and I just don't think that he's going to be anywhere close to what the Blackhawks need for their defense when they continue to get better and start making more runs for the playoffs. They have a very promising young talent in Connorbedard, brought in a ton of great free agents to surround him with, but this defense headed by Seth Jones, it's just one of the worst in the NHL right now. I don't think he's a top pairing defenseman. I think he's more of a second guy, but if he is playing on a top line, he's got to have a good pairing defenseman with him in order to be more productive. I'm not the biggest hater of Seth Jones. I do think that he has some skill, and if he's placed in the right situation, maybe a team like Nashville that he used to play on, or another one where he can thrive in, that's not a bottom of the league team, maybe this could work out. The biggest problem I have with this is that the ticket is just way too high. We're getting up to about $10 million. He's being paid more than some other elite defensemen in the league right now, close to contracts like Charlie McAvoy, Miro Heiskanen, Cale Makar. That's just not okay to me. I just don't feel like he's ever proven himself to be one of those guys. So it's not that I'm a hater of Seth Jones. I just feel like he's way too overpaid and in one of the worst situations he could possibly be in based on his talent and his overall production. So he's going to land at number 4 for this upcoming season when it comes to worst contracts. Up next, I got another Washington Capital in Tom Wilson. This one was always a strange contract to me. The Capitals are aging out. Ovi, Backstrom, Oshie, Kuznetsov, they're all either retired onto different leagues or just injured and aren't playing anymore. And at this point, I just feel like giving Wilson this sort of contract where he has 7 years left at $6.5 million was one of the weirdest things the Capitals have done in a long time. And I think a lot of people agree with me at this point. The contract's not like evil. It's not like egregious like the 9.5 we just talked about with Seth Jones, but I do think it's slightly worse just because the Blackhawks are able to eat that cap space right now because they're not trying to compete for a playoff spot. They're just trying to develop their young guys, and Seth Jones could still help them out. For this situation with Wilson, the Capitals are still trying to make the playoffs, and they could really have given this money to another forward or a better defenseman that could have maybe carried them to the playoffs and helped them win a few series. I'm just not too sure what the organization was thinking with this one. Maybe they were just trying to be respectful because Wilson has been such a constant for them and was an integral part to their championship run. But to me, this is a top 3 worst contract heading into this season. I'm not a big fan of this at all. Up next, this player showed me in the postseason that he's capable of playing a solid role as a second line defenseman. But the problem is he's making $9.3 million a season for the next 6 years, and that's Darnell Nurse. Now, everyone has ridiculed Darnell Nurse, and we've all picked apart this contract a million times, so I'm not going to repeat what everyone else is already saying. But this Nurse deal, it's going to continue to be a problem for the Edmonton Oilers. They were just in the finals last year, and some would even argue if they could have replaced Nurse or added a better forward or defenseman by paying him less money, that this team probably could have won last year. But ifs and buts are not a thing here. They lost, and they're going to be dealing with this contract for the next 6 years. When it comes to them wanting to pay guys like Ekholm again or even Bouchard, this one's going to pop up, and this team is going to regret it a lot. Maybe one day they'll be able to dish this deal out, but for right now, Nurse is continuing to play beneath his contract, and this deal continues to be one of the worst ones we've seen in a while for this league. And last but most certainly not least is the Jonathan Huberdeau contract, 7 years at $10.5 million a season. It's just brutal for this team. I'm rooting for him a lot. I feel so bad for what's happened to him since he arrived in Calgary. Things have completely gone sour. He's cut his production in half from when he was in Florida, and you can just see him struggling every game he plays in. This team lacks direction, they lack talent, and Huberdeau was supposed to be the answer in that Couture trade, but it just completely blew up in their face. Everything that's happened with Huberdeau and the Flames, it's just been the worst case scenario, and unfortunately, they're going to be dealing with this contract for the next 7 years. But if the Flames do enter this hard rebuild, this contract might actually be a good thing for them because they need to reach the cap floor, and they have a bunch of young guys on their roster right now, so they basically are just going to use this contract to do that. But yeah, tough situation for Huberdeau and the Flames, not working out exactly, and to me, it's the worst contract right now. But these are my top 10 worst contracts heading into the 2024-25 hockey season. Let me know if there's a contract I missed. I definitely know there's a few more out there that I saw some people talking about, but these were the 10 that stood out to me the most. Drop any ones I missed in the comments below and your thoughts about my takes here. Make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you guys for watching as always. I'll see you in the next one.